Hello, everyone. My name is Erika. I am our Graham Student Ministry Pastor, and I am one of our teaching pastors here at Rainier View as well. I am so glad that you are here with us today. We are finding ourselves in the second week of a series called Hard Fought Hallelujah, where we are looking at the life of Jacob. And I think the phrase hard fought hallelujah really resonates with all of us because we all love a hard fought hallelujah for someone else. We love an inspirational sports film where everyone overcomes their differences and puts in the work to understand one another, but we don't want to do that with other people. We love seeing a movie where a single mom gives her kids a better life than she ever had the opportunity to have, but we don't want as many sleepless nights to provide something better for someone else. We love to see a movie where a kid overcomes the odds, gets their grades together, becomes the star of the sports team, and gets a full ride to their dream college. But none of us want to study that hard, work out that hard, or fill out all of the paperwork. We love a hard-fought hallelujah for someone else. But let's all collectively agree on something. A hard-fought hallelujah is very inspirational when it is someone else, and it is awful when it is yours, and it is especially terrible when you are in the middle of it. In the middle of the story is often the worst place to be. All around is conflict and tension, and it feels more like a tragic Taylor Swift song than a fun one. And so let me just spoil this sermon for you right off the bat. There will be no nice resolution. It will kind of just be messy the whole way through. But the good news is we are looking at someone else's story and not yours. So you know you want to stick around and see what happens here. We ended last week with Jacob deceiving his dad and stealing his older brother's birthright, mostly by exploiting the fact that his brother was hungry, which, I'm a youth pastor, I get it. And then we pick up with Jacob fleeing to Paddan Aram, to the house of his uncle, to basically marry one of his cousins. This is kind of where we are in the story. And marrying cousins, isn't the vibe for most of us. And so I had a lot of questions, and so I turned to commentaries, people who were really smart about the Bible, and what can you tell me here? And they could tell me nothing. And then I turned to the internet, and the internet was full of mostly people trying to justify, does the Bible justify me wanting to marry my cousin? Which I was again, not really what I'm going for. I just need an answer. And so I turned to Joe Fennessy, our Parkland campus pastor, and I said, what is happening here? And basically, what Jacob is going to be participating in is a practice called endogamy, which means marrying within your family, community, clan, or tribe. And this was a super common thing at this point in time because marriage was more of a business transaction than a love situation. And people wanted to keep their wealth and their property in their families. They wanted to ensure safety and security for their friends and their family. And Jeff even chimed in and pointed out, yeah, this is actually something that people have been doing for a long time. It's a new, not as common thing. And I was oh, that's really interesting. And so, truly, what this is a helpful practice for all of us to realize is that Pierce County, Washington, 2025 is very different than the ancient Near East, which is where our story is taking place today. And Jacob is going to continue on this journey. And so he's on this trip, and he falls asleep and he has a dream. And we're going to be in Genesis chapter 28 together. That's where we will start. If you don't have a Bible, there's a great app called YouVersion that you can download, and then you have the Bible with you at all times, and it'll read it out loud to you, and it'll help you find different topics that maybe you want to deep dive or study more. It is an incredible resource, and we highly recommend downloading YouVersion. So, Genesis chapter 28, verse 10, this is what it reads. Jacob left Beersheba to head out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth, with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and the east and to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this island. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised." Now, I am someone who has really intense dreams, and this might be one of the most intense dreams that I've ever heard of. Jacob, on his journey, wakes up and realizes that God is real. And this God that his parents served and his grandparents served is wanting to continue the important work through him. And so Jacob decides, okay, God is real, but I'm not quite ready to cash all my chips in on him yet and really commit to following him. But if he does what he says he's going to do, I will worship him. Let's see, God, if this promise you've made is real. And so off he goes. And so he travels some more and he comes to a town and he sees all these people with their flocks and he asks, "Do you know Laban?" And they're like, "We do. And here comes his daughter Rachel and she is one of his shepherds." And so this is the uncle that he's hoping to meet, and then this is his daughter. And I need you to know that I think this is the earliest depiction of the phrase, "God told me to marry you," that we will ever see. Because in this moment, Jacob looks at Rachel and is he starts tearing up and he's like, "You're the one for me. I'm going to marry you." And our 2025 sensibilities feel like this is very, very fast. I'm picking up on the fact, though, this might be just how they did things. And so Laban gives the go-ahead for Jacob to marry Rachel, but with a catch. He has to work for his father-in-law, his uncle, for 7 years. So Genesis chapter 28, verse 20. This is where we're going to pick up. So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few to him because of his love for her. That is adorable, and you know it. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife. My time is completed and I want to make love to her." So Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. Everyone is partying and celebrating and the vibes are good, and then someone has to ruin the vibes. But when evening came, he, being Laban, took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and Jacob made love to her. And Laban gave his servant Zilpah to his daughter as her attendant. When morning came, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" And Laban replied, "It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Finish this daughter's bridal week, then we will give you the younger one also in return for another 7 years of work." And Jacob did so. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. He also gave his servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her attendant. Jacob made love to Rachel also, and his love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah. And he worked for Laban another 7 years. Now, at the time of this recording, I am a newlywed, and I am furious reading this. But again, thinking about this through an ancient Near East lens, there are customs and protocols. And basically, Laban thought that he might not be able to secure a suitable marriage for Leah. So the deceiver, Jacob, becomes the deceived. And Jacob is now meant to be married to both women. And this prompts a lot of questions, including but not limited to, how did Jacob miss that this wasn't Rachel? I think it's a fair question for us to ask, But I'm sure that this is going to be super cool and chill, and it's not going to cause any complications or feelings of jealousy, and everything is going to just be no big deal, and that everyone is going to just handle this in the way that they should. Just kidding. We're humans. We know that it's never going to go this way. So in this incredibly complicated marriage, we have two women, each hoping to be noticed, loved, and favored by their husband. And they believe that the only way to do this is through children. So Leah gets pregnant 4 times and gives birth to Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Then Rachel starts getting nervous and sad and insecure and pleads with Jacob to get her pregnant. And he gets mad at her and is like, "Look, I'm not stopping you from getting pregnant." And because they were living in a culture with slaves and women were considered property, Rachel says, okay, like I clearly am not able to give you children, but maybe my servant can. And so she gives her servant Bilhah to Jacob so she can start having kids that technically would have been Rachel's. And so Bilhah gives birth to Dan and Naphtali. Then Leah starts to get nervous because she hasn't had any kids recently, and so she sends her servant Zilpah to Jacob for him to have sex with, and she gives birth to Gad and Asher. Leah then gets pregnant 2 more times and gives birth to Issachar and Zebulun, and she also gives birth to a daughter named Dinah. Then Rachel gets to finally be pregnant, and she gives birth to Joseph. And then way later, way after the story that we're going to cover today, she gives birth to Benjamin. For many of us who are hearing this story, you're first being like, well, I've never found myself in a polygamous relationship where things are getting complicated. But for many who are hearing this story, you are resonating with the fact that fertility and expanding your family can be a really painful and difficult process. It is so personal. There's a pain that hits for each family that wants to grow but can't, or it's complicated. There's a pain in many women and men's hearts when they see other people getting what they have truly desired. This is the part of the story that so many can connect to. What do we do when other people are getting what we want? There is a further added cultural layer of complexity here when we look at life for people in the ancient Near East. An expanding family wasn't just the desire of a parent's heart. An expanding family meant a possibility for more wealth and property. For many, it felt like God's favor was on them or not, depending on whether or not they could have kids. For women, having sons meant extra security. In the event that their husband died, there was a man who would take care of them and advocate for them, since women had no rights at this point in time. So between these 4 women, there are 12 sons. And these 12 sons become what we know as the 12 tribes of Israel. And suddenly, this promise that was made to Abraham and Sarah, Jacob's grandparents, this promise that was made to him in a dream that he would become a great nation has become a reality. And in the midst of this reality, Jacob's life is a tumultuous mess of strained relationships and jealousy and not what he or anyone else in this relationship had in mind. And I know that God knows everything, but my goodness, from my perspective, this is a rough way to build a great nation. Which is a gift for us, if we're honest. That when we look at our situation on paper, your marriage, your relationship with your parents, how your grades are going in school, and it feels like there is nothing good that can come from it. That's just our opinion. God can do something remarkable and incredible, and he can fulfill his promises through our brokenness and in our mess. And we can see that he is good. In Jacob's mind, though, it is time for his family to hit the road and build a new life in his homeland, which he said that he would, all the way back in Genesis chapter 28, verse 21. So that I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. He has been working for his father-in-law, or father-in-deceit, as I like to call him, this whole time. And he has helped his father-in-law grow a strong flock. And so Jacob uses his deceitful ways to take advantage of his father-in-law. And he ends up with a bunch of really good and strong sheep, lambs, and goats. Don't mind me. How weirder would this story be if that's the turn that took. All right, so this is how it ends in Genesis chapter 30. In this way, the man grew exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks and female and male servants and camels and donkeys. From the outside looking in, Jacob has made it. He has a big family, a strong flock, and people to work for him. But here is what the outside looking in does not show. Here's what the outside looking in we cannot always see. There is a man who is broken, 2 wives who want to be loved so desperately that they would do anything to just earn the favor of their husband. And now we have explained a lot of things here by saying, well, the ancient Near East wasn't 2025, so get over it. But in this same time in history, this is what it reads in Leviticus chapter 18, verse 18. Do not take your wife's sister as a rival wife and have sexual relations with her while your wife is living. So in the same time and in the same place, what is happening here is not okay. Jacob was living outside of what God had deemed the best for him, even if culturally it was okay. And this is where, again, our lives can intersect with what feels like a very overdramatic soap opera. The odds were stacked against Jacob. He didn't know how to live in the mess that he was in, how he was going to get himself out of the mess that he was in, that he didn't even cause for himself necessarily. But in this moment, culturally, he had everything a man could want, but at what cost? He did what was okay by everyone else's standards, but not by God's standards. In the middle of your story, you will have lots of options, but God's option will give you long-lasting peace. God's options, though, will not be the easiest ones. They will be the ones that require more of us. They will be the options that require us to go against unconventional wisdom. They will be the options that push us into uncharted territory. But they won't be the options that lead to us taking advantage of others, manipulating a situation, cheating, or making others feel less than to us. In the middle of the story where we have God's option and everyone else's options, that will always be brutal. I'm not trying to lie to you. I don't want to sugarcoat this. Honestly, I tell my students this all the time. Following Jesus will not solve all of your problems. It will create more problems. It will also build a life of honor and goodness and the glory of God. Sometimes it's really interesting when I am the pastor who is on camera for the week, because it feels like a lot of people know me and they see me, but they don't know me, right? It's kind of the outside looking in thing. So I'm going to tell you kind of a longer story of my life. Back in 2018, I was in counseling and I was working through a lot of control issues. I don't know that I had the word for that at that time, that I just wanted to be in control of stuff. But I think everyone else around me could see that. And I don't know if that is being a person alive at this time. I don't know if it's being an overachiever. I don't know if it's being a firstborn daughter. You name it, I've got a lot of reasons why control is something that I long for. And it just felt like so much of my life was falling apart. And I was having a really hard time figuring out what to do within that. And I was keeping my struggles to myself because I was embarrassed. I'm a pastor at this point in time. Shouldn't I be so great with just giving God control of everything? And shouldn't I just be trusting him? And I remember talking to my counselor and saying, I just want people to look at my life and see God's goodness and glory. And so that's why I kept my struggles to myself, because I thought, no one is going to look at my life while I'm struggling and want to follow Jesus through my life right now. And as every good counselor does, she posed me a question that has sat with me for forever. But isn't that the thing about following God? His glory can be found in it all. That has stuck with me. It is on a banner in my office. I once made artwork around it. It wasn't great. You don't get to see it. But when life is only good, we miss out on so many facets of God's love. When there are no tough choices to make, we don't have the opportunity to rely on God's strength. When we don't tell people around us what is going on, we miss out on the opportunity to declare God's glory even in the messy middle. And so what it unfortunately requires for us is to be faithful in the middle of your hard-fought hallelujah. When you are too far away from the start to turn back around and undo everything you've done, but you are too far away from the end to be like, I can see like the big picture, just keep going. When you are in the middle, you have to stay faithful to honoring God with your life, no matter how messy or uncomfortable it is. And so life continued from 2018. And I don't know if you noticed, everything got really cool and chill in the world. And by that, I'm just kidding. And everything got more and more difficult. And in 2023, we launched something here at Rainier View called All In. And it was a church-wide discipleship initiative built around generosity. We were pushing all of us to become more generous. And in June of 2023, we had something known as a Celebration Sunday. We celebrated the first 6 weeks of All In, the commitments that people had made. We got to burn the loan for our Parkland campus because enough had been brought in for us to be able to pay that off. I got to wear a sequin jacket. I got to throw confetti. It was amazing. And then that night, I was taken to the hospital via ambulance with severe stomach pains and passing out for no good, clear, apparent reason. And then 6 months after that, the same thing happened, but worse. This time, I threw up in the emergency room. Shout out to Good Sam. Then 8 months after that, the same thing happened, but to a lesser degree, but the same thing happened. Throughout the course of the last 2 years, I had 3 emergency room runs, 2 of them via ambulance, and 1 colonoscopy by the time I turned 30. I was seeing specialists and having more tests run than I truly can actually grasp. And the bills were piling up. And I had also just increased my giving here at Rainier View. And then I joked at the start of All In because all of the paperwork for us on staff was like, staff and spouses invited to this thing. And I joked, I was like, I gotta find myself a spouse. Like, that'll be my big contribution to All In. Guess what, I did it. I'm newly married, which is great, but at the start of All In, that was nowhere in sight. And I don't know if you've noticed, but weddings in 2025 are very expensive. So I now have medical bills, and I have a wedding that I was wildly unprepared for, and I'm not wanting to go into debt, and I'm wanting to live within my means. And it was the first time where I had to literally put my money where my mouth was and keep honoring God. I could have lied. I could have told people, yeah, I'm doing it, or I'll get caught up. But I had to stay committed. I could have chosen to go into massive amounts of debt, but I said, no, I'm going to live in my means. I had to say no to things. I had to commit to the bigger picture. And I am here to tell you that I am not a millionaire. Staying financially committed to God, to what He had asked of me in that season, did not make me a millionaire. If you send $1,000 right now to me, it is not going to help you be wildly prosperous in the future. But Josh and I are in an okay place financially. We aren't facing truly awful circumstances. God has been really faithful to us when we look at our finances. And it is just this further example that when I keep my priorities actually in check, when I actually say that God is greater than anything else, then I can live with less stress. But it's having to keep my priorities in check first. In this stretch of Jacob's journey, honoring God was not his priority. In this stretch of his life, he was choosing every other option. In the middle of your story, you will have lots of options. But God's option is what will give you lasting peace. And so here is my challenge to you this week. Every day, ask yourself this question. What is one decision that I can make today to honor God? And there are some things when we read the Bible that we're like, that is clearly the decision that I have to make to honor God. And that is clearly the decision that I should not make so I honor God. It doesn't honor God to cheat on tests in school. It doesn't honor God to cheat on employees and have unethical business practices. It does not honor God to cheat on your significant other. It does honor God to tell the truth and make amends. It honors God to call out the good things you see in others. It honors God to say yes to spending time volunteering and building up your community. We feel pretty passionately around here about quite a few commitments, but one of our priorities is to break cycles of fear and shame, and so hear me clearly. I do not want you to honor God because I think it's going to make God love you more. I'm not saying honor God with your life because then he'll look at you with favor. No, that only builds on shame and fear. I want you to honor God because every time I take my problems to God and I figure out what it looks like to honor him in the midst of that situation, I have peace. It is complicated and it is difficult, and I still cry about it or want to throw up about it. But when he shows me where I have messed up, where I have been in the wrong, where I might need to make amends, he pours grace on it and he lovingly walks with me through it. And then I don't sit in this problem that I have full of fear and shame. I don't have to worry whether or not God's going to find out about my problems. First of all, he already knows our problems. Second of all, when we welcome him in, he's so excited to be part of it with us. Not only does he know what I am facing, he walks with me through it every moment. But it means that we first have to identify our decisions that aren't honoring God, and we have to actually do something about them. And so that is your one question this week. What is one decision that I can make today to honor God? Not so you will be more loved, but so you can experience God's love